Peace to the viewing audience and welcome once again to day 2, the devotionals regarding the last week of Jesus' life on earth. On yesterday, we looked at Sunday when he marched in or rode in on the donkey and people shouted out, "Hosanna, Hosanna," and we called it the day of celebration. Today we want to look at what took place on Monday during Jesus' last week on earth. And I want to label day 2, the day of frustration. And I want to look at Mark chapter number 11. Mark chapter 11, verses 15 through 19. I'm reading in the NIV translation, and you follow me along in the translation of your choice. It is the narrative of when Jesus went into the church and showed his anger by turning over the seats and the tables in which all types of corrupt things were taking place. And I call it the day of frustration. We'll be reading Mark chapter 11, verses 15 through 19. Mark is not the only gospel writer to tell the story of what took place on this Monday. As a matter of fact, all 4 gospel writers have something to say about this particular narrative. Matthew tells his story in Matthew chapter 21, verses 12 through 17. Of course, Mark tells his in chapter 11, verses 15 through 19. Luke's account can be found in Luke 19, chapter 19, verses 45 through 49. And then finally, John talks about it in John chapter 2, verses 13 through 22. I want to look at Mark's account. So join me at Mark chapter 11, verses 15 through 19. And when you read, you will discover, number 1, the actions by Jesus, verses 15 and 16, the dissatisfaction of Jesus, verse 17, and then finally the reaction to Jesus, verses 18 and 19. Did you catch that? The actions by Jesus, verse 15 and 16. Notice what verse 15 and 16 says in the NIV translation. On reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered into the temple courts and he began driving out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those who were selling doves. And he would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. Do you see that? The actions of Jesus. And then notice in verse number 17, the dissatisfaction with Jesus. It's in verse number 17. And as he taught them, he said, "It is written, my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have turned it into a den of robbers." Do you discover Jesus' dissatisfaction with the way these people were treating the Lord's house? And then verse 18 and 19, we see the reaction to Jesus. 18 says, the chief priests and the teachers of the law heard this, and they began looking for a way to kill Jesus, for they feared him because the whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. And when evening came, Jesus and his disciples went out of the city. This is literally one of the most exciting reads in all of the Bible. You discover Jesus' actions and how he went in, turning over seats and table. You discover Jesus' dissatisfaction, how he wanted his house. He wanted the Lord's place to be a place of prayer, but they had made it a place of thieves and a den of people who were not right hanging out. And then you see the reaction to Jesus as a result of what he did. people literally wanted to take his life. And you know what we discover? You know what we discover? When you look at the frustration of Jesus, you discover in these verses when Jesus expressed his anger. When Jesus expressed his anger. And I want to give you three elements about Jesus expressing his anger from this particular story. Here's number one. Jesus expressed his anger towards what was corrupt. Jesus expressed his anger towards what was corrupt. And we see it. We see it right there in verse number 15. It says Jesus entered into the temple courts and he began driving out all those who were buying and selling. Guess who was corrupt? The people. The people. Because they were overcharging those who came into the temple and those who had come from miles away to Jerusalem and had to have an offering. And the people made the prices so high, so that they were not affordable, that they were taking advantage of their brothers and sisters. And Jesus expressed his anger towards what was corrupt. Number two, Jesus expressed his anger towards what the people counted on. What the people counted on. And guess what they were counting on? They were counting on the tables. They were counting the monies on the table. And Jesus did what? He overturned the table. He overturned the table. Number one, Jesus expressed his anger towards what was corrupt. Number two, Jesus expressed his anger towards what people was counting on. And then finally, Jesus expressed his anger towards what made people comfortable. What made people comfortable? Because he not only got rid of the people, because they were corrupt, he not only overturned the tables, because that's where they were counting, but he overturned the seats. And guess what? That's what made people comfortable. That's what made people comfortable. That's where they were sitting. And could this story be designed to teach you and I that whenever we find ourselves involved in corruption, and whenever we find ourselves counting on anything or anyone other than Jesus, or whenever we find ourselves at a place of comfort, that Jesus gets so upset that he expresses frustration and anger by turning things over. And I say to you today, let's learn from this narrative and make the Lord's temple, the Lord's sanctuary, a house of prayer. Thank you for joining me for devotion number 2. And this is your personal invitation to meet me back tomorrow for day number 3 of Jesus's last week on earth. It's all of my time. Thanks for your time.